Hello, this is part 4B. I want you to hear a little bit of Sam Cooke about change.
It's been a long time coming, but I know a change gonna come.
Thank you for joining me again for part B, 4B of Change Must Come Now. And this is, excuse me, this is a continuation of my series, actually the conclusion of my series, The Simplicity and Ugliness of Racism in America. Of course, I've done 3 segments already, and I just completed 4A at 8 p.m. I started 4A, and now we're doing 4B at 9:15. And right now, what we're going to talk about is change. It's been a long time coming, but change is going to come. That was a Sam Cooke song that I mentioned earlier. What I had said, one of the things that I had said earlier is that one of my friends alluded to a section of my book, Emmanuel's Bride and the Holy Spirit. He's a white friend who we've had some really good discussions about racism in America and different approaches to that. And he loves the book, so he told me, hey, please, you need to share this part. And so I'm going to share it because I think it was good advice, good input that he gave me. And this was on page 88. And this was a section of my book where the subtitle was Faith Accessible to Everyone. It's going to take faith for this thing to be tackled. You have to believe that this can change. You have to believe that this can be done. Otherwise, what's the point in doing anything? So you have to believe that even though you cannot see how, but you hope that it will change, and you're sure and you're certain that it could be changed. Because for me personally, I've seen changes happen, big changes historically, and God has been the one to do it. So with God's help, God's strength, God's guidance, God's love, and faith in God, it can be done. So I'm going to read this part from my book. It's on page 88. It says, regardless of intelligence, social or economic status, speech issues, physical disabilities, or prowess or skin color, faith is accessible to everyone and anyone, anywhere. No matter what your color, no matter what abilities you have, disabilities, speech issues, faith is available to anyone, everywhere, and anytime. God has given us a medium that we can all have access to easily. The Christian life is about believing God, trusting God, acting on what God says based on our trust in Him, the Creator. This is our role. Our role is to trust God, to believe that He can do it. God gives us a simple plan. Just trust Him and go by His explanations. We submit to Him, all will be straightened out. It's a simple thing. Although faith is simple, living it can be a challenge. As humans, we have a tendency to put our twist on things. We want to be able to say, look what I did. We want to say, I was original and better than the next person. Faith says, believe and act on God's promises and see what God will do with your faithfulness to Him. Faith puts the responsibility on God and gives credit to God. See, what I'm saying in reading this is that I am putting my responsibility and trust in God. I'm a human being that has a lot of faults, and I have limitations. But when I put all my issues on God, He gives me the direction of how to handle those issues. He gives me the vision of where to go with those issues. And it's not just me. He gives it to anybody who wants to have faith in Him and wants to trust Him and walk with Him. You see, when you look at the story of the Egyptians having enslaved the Israelites, God said something about Pharaoh. He said he raised up Pharaoh. He let Pharaoh become a major leader and force to be reckoned with. He made Pharaoh one of the most powerful people on earth at the time. And then he had the Israelites be subject to Pharaoh. And so God says, I needed a big obstacle, or a leader in this case, so I could prove to you that it is possible to do this. In fact, there are different parts in the Bible where Jesus says, nothing is impossible for the one who believes. And then in Philippians 4:13, it says, I can do all things through him who gives me strength. And so what I'm saying to you is this, and now I'm saying this especially to my Black fellow human beings on this earth, but specifically in the United States. You must believe that this could be changed. It's been a long time coming, but change is going to come. You have to believe that. And I'm also saying to my white friends, we can work together to change this issue. We must believe that there is a way. And God is funny. He says, if you make yourself available to me and you want to change this, I will work through you to get this done. That's how God works. From reading the Bible for over 30 years, from experiencing life as a Christian, I fully believe that and trust that God is able to do this. And I also believe that the evil that comes from the devil, yes, he does exist. The evil that comes from the devil can be pushed back by God. And it has been done at many times. Now, there are some of you who are saying, well, why is it taking so long? I can't tell you why it's taking so long, but I know that it could change now. I believe it could change now. There are a lot of things that have changed in the past, and this is not any different from that. It could be changed as well. So first thing I want to say is to my Black friends, especially to the mothers who have lost their sons from lynchings, from beatings, from police brutality, from being shot, from burnings, from just hateful racial stuff. I want to say that God understands your pain. God feels your pain. I want to look at a passage here in Jeremiah chapter 31. Prior to that, I also want to remind you that when I think about the pain that people have gone through, I was so moved that I wrote a song called Shot into History. And one of the things that it says is who's going to comfort you? Who's going to help you deal with this pain that you're going through right now? Also, it says the bullet that killed your son, did it understand? Did it see your color, that it went for you instead? So I have been dealing with this issue and trying to address this issue for a while, because my song Shot into History it says Trayvon Martin, Amadou Diallo, and Sean Bell. And it was at the time that Trayvon Martin was killed. So going back to Jeremiah 31, it says, a voice is heard in Ramah, mourning and great weeping, Rachel weeping for her children and refusing to be comforted because they are no more. This is what the Lord says, restrain your voice from weeping and your eyes from tears, for your work will be rewarded, declares the Lord. They will return from the land of the enemy. So there is hope for your descendants, declares the Lord. Your children will return to their own land. But I want to focus here on the part where it says, Rachel is weeping for her children, and she refuses to be comforted because they are no more. There are countless mothers, fathers, family members that have lost loved ones to this brutal regime of racism, this brutal regime of white supremacy that exists in the United States, that was put in place by white forefathers after slavery to ensure that whites would always be on top, blacks would be at the bottom. And then they stepped it up with Jim Crow laws and a lot of other laws to make sure that blacks would never rise up. But blacks, no matter what has happened, they have been rising and rising, rising anyway. Despite many years, centuries of illiteracy, they have fought to learn to read and fought to learn to understand and fought to have equal status in America. And now I'm saying it is time for us to dismantle this racist, imbalanced system, this unfair, unloving, hateful system that promotes the color of one's skin over the love of God. It's a shame that there are people who push this and support this and actually call themselves Christians. You cannot call yourself a Christian and promote this. You are an imposter. You cannot call yourself a Christian and promote this. It is not possible. Christ does not condone this. And so what I'm saying to my black mothers especially, God hears your crying. He feels your pain. In fact, I want to read something really quickly in Exodus chapter 3. It says, the Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I can say the misery of my people in the United States. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers or their oppressors, and I am concerned about their suffering. You see, God is concerned about the suffering that the blacks are going through in the United States. He's concerned about their oppression. And you know, when you feel oppressed and you've been oppressed for such a long time, it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel. You feel like there's been all these protests, there's been a lot of voices, there's been a lot of demands, and it has not stopped. You're looking for ways to bring the change to happen. But I want you to realize and to recognize that God understands what you're going through. God feels your pain. And as strange as this will sound, as this sounds, God will get you there. God has you, has me at a good place. We didn't want this, but I feel like as black people, we are chosen by God to go through this in the United States of America. Because those who suffer have a special place in God's heart. Those who go through oppression and are being treated unjustly have a special place in God's heart. God has a special reward for the people who are suffering on this earth and who have been killed, maliciously killed, and sent to him. He has a special place for people who have had to suffer while they are on earth. And the ones who have not had to suffer on earth, he says, you already received all your good while you were on earth. And so it's a little different. I can't tell you exactly how it happens, but if you look at the story of the rich man and Lazarus in the book of Luke, it talks about that. You can look into it further. And so, black people, my people, you are special. You are extraordinary people. You can expect more because God wants you to have more. And don't feel like you have to keep proving yourself that you're worthy, you're just as good and all that, because you already are. Don't accept the myths, the lies that you have been given about your color, because that is irrelevant. Color has nothing to do with intelligence, abilities, social, anything. This is a construct that has been set up. This is something that was made up by man. It was made up by evil men. And it has lasted for a long time. It's gotten a little better, slightly, but it should be a lot better. And so right now, what I'm going to talk about is more of what needs to change and how it needs to change. A few reminders, my Black people. It says in Matthew 5, verse 3, blessed are those who are poor in spirit. You're blessed if you're poor in spirit. He says, blessed are those who are hunger and thirst for righteousness, for you will be filled. It also talks about blessed are the merciful in Matthew 5, verse 7. And some of you are like, why would you call Black people merciful? Well, when you think about the atrocities that have been inflicted on Black people for so long, there's a lot of records, excuse me, a lot of records that Blacks can hold against whites. There's a lot of anger that could exist, but I believe Blacks are merciful because they're not acting out of their anger or their hurt or their long history of being hurt. And instead, they're learning to, for the most part, to be nonviolent. They're learning to trust God. They're learning to hope. They're learning to focus on being constructive in changing things. So, blessed are the merciful, is what it says in Matthew 5, 7. It also says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they will see God. Proverbs chapter 20, verse 30 says that blows, hits, purify the soul. Romans 5 says, consider pure joy whenever you go through trials of many kinds, because you know the testing of your faith develop perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And hope does not disappoint us. That's what Romans 5 says, verses 1 through 5. It says that when you suffer, you develop perseverance. You develop character after you develop perseverance. And then character develops hope. And hope does not disappoint us. We're the most hopeful people on this earth, especially in the United States, because we have suffered a lot. We are pure in heart in many ways because we have been receiving many blows. See, when you're suffering and you're being hit many different ways, you learn to have a different existence that's above the regular day-to-day things. You learn to appreciate life differently. And the things that you produce out of your songs, your writing, your speaking are based out of character. And so, although we don't like this position, God has chosen us to, in a sense, be a big brother to America because we are men and women of great character because we have suffered for a long time in America. There's no doubt about it. So what that says about the white population, if you're not suffering as much, then your character is not being as developed. It's the opposite that's happening. You're not as hopeful because you haven't had to go through all this. But we can all benefit from each other because we are all one family together. You see, being on top, being first, not having to go through hard times is not always a good thing. But right now, I'm looking at these passages because I want Blacks to understand that you have a special place in God's heart because of what you have gone through. James chapter 1 says, consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith develops perseverance. Right? And it talks about just how perseverance must finish its work so that you will be mature and complete, not lacking in anything. When we go through trials, and Blacks have been going through trials for a long time, it says, God says, consider pure joy. Now, pure joy, I don't know. I feel like it's saying that as you understand it, you go, this is good. But as you're going through it, you don't say it's good because what we feel is not good. But we have special blessings waiting for us from God because of what this country has done to us. That is our place. We have a special God. We have a special place in God's heart, in God's sight because of what we're going through. But that doesn't mean we don't want change. We still want change. And so here are some things that I would like to say to blacks that we can do to bring about change. This is what you can do as an individual, as a black person. First of all, you have to believe, as I said, that this can be undone. You have to decide that you're not going to accept the mistreatment. If somebody does something that you consider racist, call them out on it and say, you're using your white privilege, you're being a white supremacist right now, and you seem to believe that you should be first when that is not the case. Expose it, just like the bully. When the whole class sees the bully and says, hey, you don't need to be this way. We know why you're being a bully, because your parents are divorcing or whatever it is. That bully, once they feel exposed, they calm down. And so we need to shed light on the perpetrators of these things and keep exposing them. I know it's already happening all over the internet, but keep exposing it. Keep talking about it. Every black person needs to learn the laws of this country, the ones that are beneficial and the ones that are not beneficial, and decide who you will vote for that will change those laws. You need to also decide that you personally will run for office. Do whatever it takes. Learn what you need to do to run for office to change the laws. Now, I know in the past, blacks actively ran for office, set up communities, and were very successful at doing it. But I also know that there were white supremacists who were violent men and women who burnt down those offices, burnt down those businesses, burnt down the banks and newspapers, and made sure that the blacks would not advance and create their own communities in a thriving way. So that has happened historically. But I'm saying keep believing and go and do that again. Learn how the system works. At times it's very boring. I think it's intentional, but learn how it works and figure out how to destroy it in terms of the things that are negatively impacting the black community. You learn how to do it. Expect it from your schools. Ask your schools to teach about the U.S. government, not just U.S. history, but how do we make up the laws? How do we get voted in? How do we change the laws? Make it something that's really interesting and very interactive so that blacks are not going to school and say, oh, we don't want to hear about this. Demand that your kids learn about civics and how that works. Also, buy from black businesses. If you're a black business owner, make sure you have excellent business going on. Get the reviews or whatever so that people compete with the other white companies and make sure that what people are looking for, you give it to them. I know there are a lot of great black companies. So I'm saying buy black. Also, if you see a white company that is supporting any candidate, any president that is promoting racist tactics and using that dog whistle to separate the country, don't buy at that company. Ignore them. Don't feed them more money to give to their candidates that are turning around and dismantling what you're trying to do as a black person. Find out what those companies are and who they represent, because every corporate can be called a corporation, but the owners of the corporations are the ones that are giving millions of dollars to lobbyists, to candidates that are practicing oppressing black people and other people of color that they don't want near them. There's some people that have gone out of their way to change school boards to make sure that they destroyed any busing, any mixing of the communities, because they want to keep their systems homogenized. They want to keep it all white and keep the blacks and other people of color out of it. Don't buy at any of those stores. Find out who they are, what they are about. I mean, I learned something about Home Depot And I'm saying, if I have to, I will probably buy a small item from them, because I learned that one of their CEOs is funneling money into a campaign that's promoting racism. I don't need to give any of my money towards that. While for those, I hear that the CEO is not that kind of person. I'm just saying personally, that's what I found out. You can go look it up yourself. Whatever companies you are spending your money, make sure you know what they are about. And so as I went over this before, the Black consumer funnels in about $1.2 trillion into the US economy. 1.2 trillion. That's $1.2 trillion comes from Black people. Give your power over to people who will help you, not people who want to kill you, spit at you, kick you, and shut you out. That is counterproductive. Don't buy any place. Don't buy at any place. Do your research. There are people who do couponing. They have a little packet of coupons, and they're like, this is for toiletries, this is for bedroom stuff, this is for food. They keep track of their toiletries and all the different coupons, and they're very good at it. They save hundreds of dollars. I mean, I see them with a whole cart, 2 carts of things, free. They're very diligent about their coupons. I say this to say, make up your own system. These companies, I will shop because they promote Black advancement, and they're not trying to be counterproductive. They're not trying to stop my vote. These companies I'm putting in this folder because I'm staying away from them. And I'm telling my kids, we're not buying these sneakers from this company. We're buying it from that company. This company is messing us up. We're not giving money to places that are going to hurt us and buy guns that these people use to kill us. We're not doing that. So buy Black or support businesses that support helping the Black community. If somebody does something racially motivated against you, a police department, a company, sue them. Get a lawyer and sue them. Make them pay. A while back, I did a post, a commentary, because I did some things for CNN iReport. And somebody said, you know how I think he used to be a policeman or a lawyer, but he said, the way you will get their attention is sue the municipalities that have these policemen that are going crazy and doing whatever they want. Sue them. You sue them for $4 million or whatever it is, they're going to say, you have to go and you guys better shape up because we're not going to pay another $4 million in a couple of months to cover for what you've done wrong. Make them pay for what they did wrong. Sue them. Use the law. Figure out the way to get the money. Ask for the money if you need it. Find a lawyer who will do it. Sue them. I already said this. Run for office. Parent your children so they don't become counterproductive to your cause. Help your children understand how to live in this society, how to value their education, how to make the most of their lives so that they can move things ahead for you. Keep exposing the ugliness of racism. You see something, say something. Like we talk about terrorism, right? Take a picture if you need to. Take a videotape. I know that's already happening, but put it online. Expose the ugliness of racism, all right? Make sure you understand your local, state, and federal governments. Understand how things work. It's one thing to protest, and that's very important because it brings a big awareness, but we have to translate all of that energy and momentum into some specific changes in laws and behaviors and just really making sure that things change. And I know there's some things that have been changing gradually. Learn to invest your monies wisely. Learn to invest your monies wisely. Find some safe investments. and invest your money so that you can create the kind of wealth that you want to create for the future. Here's the other thing. Make sure I said this, put the money in your community. If you can create a bank, if you could start a bank or get some people together to start a bank, a black bank, do that. You're probably the one to start the bank. Start the bank and encourage the community to invest in your bank. Start your own political party. Get some people together and start your own political party. A political party that's about changing things and really galvanizing people who want to be a light in the United States of America, who want to make change. All right, make sure you protect your assets. I don't know if you start a bank, make sure you have armed guards so that somebody who's white supremacist who sees you flourishing doesn't decide we're going to rob this bank, we're going to destroy this bank. Make sure you have protection for your assets. And I think some of you could decide, I want to start a black anti-defamation league. I know the Jews have an anti-defamation league because they don't want anybody using anti-Semitic things against them. They don't want to relive anything close to what happened to them in the time of Nazi Germany, specifically Adolf Hitler. We need to start in Black Anti-Defamation League. If you can have a black media power, I started a little thing called Depeine Media Works. It's not much of a power yet, but whatever you can start to control the media, to control the information about black people, start it up so that we can go to your news station and hear encouraging, positive news about what's happening in a black community, because we don't want to keep watching those television shows and news stations that perpetually put a black person about every day to say, here are the criminals of the country, when that's not true. They rarely put a white face in front of that camera. And when there's a teenager that's black that does a crime or gets caught or suspected of a crime, his face is front and center. When it's a white teenager, you don't even see it. They never show the face because they respect them as a minor. Why don't they respect them as a black minor as well? What I'm saying is start your own media company. And so now here's another part of my segment where I want to talk about what the country needs to do for blacks in America. We just talked about what each individual can do to change the situation. Now I'm talking to Uncle Sam. He's not much of an uncle to me because my uncle would not treat me that way. But we are a family, so he is our uncle in some way. All right? So I want to look at a passage that I love, and it talks about change. Excuse me. It talks about change. It's in 2 Corinthians chapter 7. And this is Paul talking to the church because he had challenged the church on making some changes. And he was really strong about the changes that need to be made. And he felt like, let me just read it. He said, even if I caused you sorrow by my letter, I do not regret it. Though I did regret it, I see that my letter hurt you, but only for a little while. So they felt bad. They felt guilty, like most white people should feel about racism. That's the truth. You should feel guilty because in some way you have supported it. But now that your eyes are opening up, you're making changes, and that's good. And if you've always been making changes and you've always had your eyes open, then you don't feel guilty. Right? Okay, so, yet now I am happy, not because you were made sorry, but because your sorrow led you to repentance. You could feel so bad that you go, I'm going to change my attitude, my actions, definitely my mind. It says, for you became sorrowful as God intended, And so we're not harmed in any way by us. So the letter didn't destroy them. The letter led them to change. And see, I'm hoping that the things that you hear about racism, what I've said, what other blacks have said, what whites have said about what's wrong with racism, that it brings you to feel sorrowful if you have not been doing anything against it. If you've been doing something to stop it or to undo it, then you have nothing to feel sorrowful about. But it says here, this is what Paul is saying that godly sorrow promotes or brings about. It says, godly sorrow brings repentance that leads to salvation and leaves no regret, but worldly sorrow brings death. You see, he says that godly sorrow is a sorrow that makes you change, and when you change, you don't regret the change. But when you have worldly sorrow, when you just change because people say you need to change, you just change just because you were caught, that's not a real change. And look what he says is this godly sorrow produces. It says, see what this godly sorrow has produced in you. What earnestness, what eagerness to clear yourselves, what indignation, what alarm, what longing, what concern, what readiness to see justice done. At every point, you have proved yourselves to be innocent in this matter. You see, he's saying that when you have godly sorrow, you're earnest. You're eager to clear yourself. You don't want to be considered a selfish person anymore. You don't want to be considered a person that's self-seeking. You don't want to have the blood of black people on your hand anymore. You're alarmed about it. And you're ready to see justice done. You're indignant. You're like, no, I don't want the blood of these black people on my head or on the head of my families. Because one thing I realize in God's word is that God always makes people pay at some point for the unrighteousness that they have inflicted on other people. Somehow he does confront them if they don't change. So he says, what indignation, what eagerness to clear yourselves, what alarm, what longing. You just can't wait to see this. You just can't wait to deal with racism. You just can't wait to talk to somebody about doing something about this. You're concerned. You're at every point, you are ready to see justice for blacks done if we apply it to racism. It says at every point, you have proved yourself to be innocent in this matter. Have you proven yourself to be innocent of the blood of blacks as a result of racism? Because anytime you do take advantage of it, you're moving the system along. But when you refute it and you denounce it, you're stopping that guilty verdict on you. And so I want to talk about two words that I expect to see in America, that every black person should expect to see in America from Americans. The first word, the first word is restitution. And the Oxford Dictionary says that restitution is the restoration of something lost or stolen to its proper owner. What was lost or stolen from blacks? Well, they worked for over 300 years and they were given no wages. Even when they were emancipated, they did not get the 40 acres and the mule. They did not get any land. They never kept any property because they weren't allowed to have property. So all of that was taken from them. That was stolen. That needs to be restored. That needs somehow, we have to make this right in America. See, America's racial problems will never change, will never get better with this outstanding debt. It cannot be. It's like saying, I know I stole your car, and I know you see your car in my driveway, but why don't you come over and let's have lunch, and we'll talk about the good old days. You wouldn't want to talk about the good old days. You would keep looking at your car and say, you have my car in your driveway and you want to talk? You need to give that car back. You see, the same with this. We can't say, we worked this out and not give back what was stolen from blacks. There's a way for it to be worked out. But the thing is, it needs to be done. Reparation. That's a French word. It's réparation, right? It's to repair something, fix it. The making of amends for a wrong one has done by paying money or otherwise helping those who have been wronged. There have been reparations in the United States and other countries for people who have suffered loss as a result of concentration camp issues or wars. In the United States, I know there was reparation for the Japanese internment camps that were here during World War II. And so, I know in the Black community, sometimes we've laughed and said, yeah, reparations, yeah, good luck with that. Yeah, no, it needs to happen. Reparations needs to happen for this issue to be addressed. And so, here are some things that I would say are part of the reparation restitution process. Laws definitely have to be changed. I propose that we release every non-violent drug offender immediately. People who were incarcerated for years because they had possessed some type of drug or they were drug addicts themselves, they need to be released. And the other thing connected to that, the licensing laws that have been put in place for dispensary of legal marijuana, those things need to be changed so that it's also accessible to Blacks so that they can get licenses as well. It should not be reserved for the multimillionaires. That needs to be changed. I'm not a drug user. I don't care for it. But I think it's a big slap in the face to put away all these Black people because they were selling drugs, and then you turn around and make it legal, and then you shut them out and don't even allow them to sell it legally. That's something wrong. That's a shame. Here's the other thing. Revise the probation laws. How could you have somebody be on probation for years after they've served their time, then you put them in probation for years just so they could make a slight mistake and bring them back in jail for another few years? The slavery, that needs to stop. Change your probation laws. The person's out, they're out. That's it. They need to have a fresh start. Restore voting rights for those who have had a felony record. A lot of the Blacks that have felony records are because they were, first of all, they were put in jail because they took a plea deal because they were convinced by some prosecutor that, hey, we could put you in jail for 25 years or you could take 5 years or 3 years and you don't have a person to represent you fully anyway, so why don't you take the deal? And they took the deal. So many Blacks are in jail because of that. Get rid of that. The felony, if there's any state that has a felony law that says that you cannot vote, that needs to be repealed. That needs to be destroyed, sent out of there. Okay? Voter suppression. I cannot believe in 2020 that there are political parties, politicians who are still fervently figuring out ways to keep blocks of people from voting. They are doing everything possible to suppress the votes of people who are Black or people who are of color or people who don't serve their interest. There needs to be a voter commission. There needs to be a voter body that's federally guaranteed, federally monitored, so that there's one system that protects the rights of every American to vote freely. I can't believe that there are people who are actively trying to make sure that in this COVID-19 era that people should be allowed to vote by mail. Why should that be stopped? Why are so many people using that kind of influence to keep people from voting and put people in harm's way when they should have the option in a modern civilization, a Western country, where you're saying you're not going to give people the right to vote by mail? That there are communities, states that are saying, no, we don't want that. We want to see long lines, blocks and blocks of lines, and only have one precinct open so that we discourage voting. That voter suppression, that's a racist tactic. Any community that is using voter suppression tactics is totally a racist tactic because it hurts blacks and other minorities. That needs to be changed so we can say, now we see reparation, we see restitution. There should be one federal guideline. Also, there should be hate crime. When a black person is murdered, when an unarmed black person is killed, or somebody who is innocently killed by law enforcement, that should be a hate crime. There should be hate crimes associated with all these things. And the thing I've seen is that the Constitution that says that all men are created equal, the same Constitution is the same one that suppresses blacks and have let whites overrun the Constitution for their own purposes. That needs to change, and it needs to be federally run, and it needs to be something that is clearly protected so that any president who comes with any racist ideologies cannot just dismantle it. It needs to be something that is protected so that it is part of the Constitution. There needs to be changes in the real estate restrictions that keep blacks from moving into certain white neighborhoods. And I know some of you who are listening to this are like, I don't know if I'm ready for that yet. Well, if you want to do what God wants you to do, if you want to have a clear conscience and you want to answer God and say, I'm a person that believes in the truth and righteousness, because at the end, everybody's going to have to face God. You should let that go and not hold on to the racial stereotypes that you've been led to believe. So there needs to be changes in the real estate restrictions. Also, there needs to be laws in place that says that any offensive statue, any offensive statue or Confederacy flag needs to be removed from all states. I don't want to hear anyone saying, well, that's part of our heritage. Yeah, you inherited the same racist ideology that those people had. And I don't want to be subject to that. I don't want to go in a certain place in the South and feel like I have to submit or be in the presence of a statue that says, I wanted my best to keep you blacks under my foot. I don't want that. That needs to change. I know in Germany, they don't have statues of Hitler in public. I know they don't have it. I know in Europe, you don't have that. It would be very offensive to the Jews and the other people that were killed under his rule. So why is it allowed in the United States to have these Confederate soldiers who were clearly fighting to keep the system the way it was? Why are we keeping those statues up? Some have been torn down, but all of them should be torn down. They're absolutely worthless. They are worthless to the cause of becoming a better America. If you want to keep the old America, yes, they're very valuable. But for the new America, the America that considers other people, they're worthless. Their flag, worthless. It only shows an insensitivity and a disregard for the blacks that are still living under this regime of racism. That needs to be changed. There needs to be unbiased commissions that review police brutality issues. You cannot have the same prosecutor in the same town that the policeman works in to prosecute that policeman. That does not work. You cannot say, hey, I know we've been working together for all these years. You've been bringing me suspects and I've been prosecuting them, and we've been working together as a team. But now I'm going to prosecute you. That's not possible. That's asking too much of those prosecutors. You need an independent prosecutor when those kind of things come up. Someone who is outside of the community, someone who hopefully is federally employed, someone that is governed by a different entity other than that town, because their loyalty is to that policeman and to the town that they're in. That's how it works. Nobody can split their brain and their heart and prosecute the way they need to in those kind of situations. So you need an independent group to do that. Another thing to look at is I've alluded to this in my third segment about profiting from blacks. National College Athletic Association, the NCAA, you need to start paying these athletes that you're making so much money off of. You're making money from the way that they dress. You're making money from the way that they play. And you're making billions from them and giving them nothing. That needs to change. There's no way to justify that. Corporate law, I believe, needs to change. I don't want to be a black person that comes up with an idea and a white corporate owner decides it's mine. I have the rights to it because you're working in my company when you came up with the idea. That needs to change. However it needs to change, it needs to be changed. And finally, this is the other one. There needs to be cash. I'm going to repeat it. Cash reparations. Cash reparations needs to occur. Cash reparations needs to occur for blacks that are descendants of slave blacks. If you're a descendant of someone who was enslaved in America, you need to get cash reparations. Excuse me. I propose a minimum of $300,000 to $500,000 per person that's a descendant of a slave master. Not a descendant of slave master, but who was formerly a relative who was a slave, who was enslaved. All right, so that we need to figure out how that needs to happen, but there needs to be some kind of cash reparations to make up for all the labor, the benefits, and the lack of property to give some kind of infusion into the black community. That needs to be done to fix this issue. Okay, when you think about it, there's been about over 400 years of free labor that needs to be made up for. Close to actually over 300 years of labor. And the other thing is, part of that cash should come from, here it is, should come from the descendants of slave owners. You know who you are. You inherited the colonial homes, those huge mansions, all the money that was made from cotton, all the money that was made from cane, all that money that was made, that was passed down to you, that generational wealth. You need to give some of that wealth towards the reparation because you did not earn that by yourself. You thought of a lot of ideas, but all the labor came from black slaves. You need to show good faith, good effort, and it should be mandated that if you are a descendant of a slave owner, you will be helping to support that fund to fix this issue in America, because it does need to be fixed. And so those are the things that I am proposing. Those are things that I'm proposing need to change so that change could be a change that is restorative and a change where we can say there's true reparation. We need whites to be a part of that and helping out, dealing with the discomfort, doing whatever it takes to make this a regular conversation, helping to change the laws, and deciding that you're going to humble yourself and put a black person ahead of you in whatever way you can, or just simply connect and say, I apologize for what we have done to you. If you excuse me, if you allow me to say this, I just want to say I'm sorry, and I want to do whatever I can to help this to be different. Blacks, you do whatever you can as individuals. Buy black, buy in companies that will support your cause, not companies that will turn around to use your money to hurt you. $1.2 trillion of our money needs to go to causes or to people that support us, appreciate us, and want us around. Figure out how to make your own banks. Figure out how to help your children. Figure out how to do things so that you don't have to feel like you are dependent on any of this nonsense for your life to get better. Also, you have to trust God, because God is going to get us there. God is the one who will give us the means to do this the way it needs to be done. And so there needs to be reparations. We have to expect it. I'm going to close out with 2 passages from the book of Proverbs. Proverbs 29, verse 13. It says, "The poor and the oppressor have this in common. The Lord gives sight to the eyes of both." You see, the poor and the oppressor have something in common. The eyes that the poor have, the blacks, they're poor because they didn't have all this generational wealth. The poor have eyes and the oppressor have eyes. So when I see you oppressing me, you see me being oppressed, but the one who gave us eyes is God. He sees it very clearly. So you will have to answer to him if you do not change this. Here's the other passage. Proverbs 29 again, verse 1. It says, "Whoever remains stiff-necked after many rebukes will suddenly be destroyed without remedy." It says that if you stay stiff-necked, that means you won't budge. You won't change, even though people are telling you. You've been hearing this for years. You've been hearing this from the day you started slavery. Your forefathers heard it. They passed it down to you, and now you're hearing it. America has heard this since the 1500s. Slaves crying out because of their harsh conditions. Slaves in the boats going across the Atlantic and being in the belly of the ship and throwing up, getting sick, crying, dying, singing all to God and asking for strength, begging to be released, trying to be released. Over and over again, people have been challenged about lynching. People have been challenged about brutality. People have been challenged about racism. This racism issue, rebuke, and rebuke is a sharp, harsh correction. This is a rebuke for America. If you've had many, many rebukes and you don't change, you remain stiff-necked, God says you will suddenly be destroyed. You are doing a disservice to America if you do not address this issue. And it says you will be destroyed without remedy. There will not be any cure for it. So let's really work together. And although change has taken a long time, but it must change now. Thank you again for listening. Thank you for taking the time to be with me. And when you have a chance, I want you to go to my YouTube channel to also look at some of the other things that I've done, where I go more in depth about the role of the Christian and also just the role of the church in helping the oppressed, because God definitely cares about injustice and he wants his people to shed light on it. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time and I appreciate your energy, and let's continue to work together. Good night.
If you like what you saw and you'd like to see more in the future, subscribe.